Welcome to Attachment Matters, a series of conversations between two moms who love to nerd out on the subject of attachment. We'll dive into what it is, what it isn't, what it relates to, what it can mean for parenting, and how it can help us explain the current state of things. Rose was introduced to Dr. Gordon Neufeld's attachment-based developmental model when her two sons were very young, and it has significantly shaped her life. She brings a depth of knowledge from the work of Dr. Gordon Neufeld, having taken a number of courses at the Neufeld Institute. This series offers her the opportunity to share insights from this model with parents who are trying to make sense of their trans-identified children.
As a mom of two teens and a former classroom educator, StoicMom has an intense interest in attachment and development. She's done some serious dabbling into the Neufeld bank of knowledge, but also has a knack for scanning the environment for frameworks to discover where they overlap and where they diverge. In her work supporting parents of trans-identified kids, she's committed to making sense of how we find ourselves grappling with things like gender identity and the other ways that our kids are struggling to find their place in this world. Both of us found ourselves entangled in the world of gender ideology, following very different routes to get here. We share a passion for the attachment framework as a way to understand and fulfill our roles and responsibilities as mothers in these oh so strange times.
In this episode, we revisit what to do with the impulse to fix, and we touch on the way our culture uses leverage to drive behavior. We also explain why we might want to extend abundant grace to our children. Rose introduces the last three more vulnerable stages of attachment, and we define Neufeld's concept of collecting.
What I want to caution against is not recognizing that the impulse to fix is there for a good reason, and I don't want to tell people not to feel that way or to even try to fix. My goal in pointing it out is not to tell parents to resist the impulse, because it has work to do. It's like our entire human civilization is based on these impulses, so they're super important.
Based on, structured around, when you say based on,
what do you
mean by that?
Like frustrate, like I'm going to create change. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to make it work. It's like what Neufeld talks about is like these emotions have work to do.
Yes.
So I don't want to give anyone the impression that they should not have this impulse. You know what I mean? Or that there's something wrong. It's like beyond pathologizing it. It's also like, the goal is not to try to shut it down.
I think any impulse is information.
Totally. And there might be things that we should try to fix.
Yes.
So
yes.
I want to, it was something that lingered with me from last time that I was like, I want to make sure I'm not telling people to try to shut this down, or that they shouldn't follow this impulse ever. It's like, it's there for a reason. Sometimes we should be doing fixing. We should be, we need to be.
Yes. Yes.
Though I hear what you're saying, like in the purity of that emotion, do we always want to be acting? Perhaps it's not in our best interest.
I think that, as we talked about in the last episode, it's a matter of consciousness, right? We have named that impulse to fix, which I'm sure probably resonated with many listeners. They know what that feels like. So now it's recognizable. And if they can recognize it, oftentimes that allows for more agency in what you do with the impulse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think sometimes we're just so uncomfortable. We're trying to make whatever is creating that discomfort stop.
Mm. Mm.
in
Mm.
whatever way possible. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like that impulse to fix is a this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and I need to stop it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was having this thought even about about retreat because we talked about the only way um, is through, and I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking not always, right?
Mm.
Sometimes you're at a stage in the game where you can still retreat.
Mm.
And that too is important information and maybe something to test. Are we
Mm.
early enough into this that we can just back out?
Mm.
I think for some families that might be the case, and I think some families have had success with that. And
Mm.
sometimes the kid is in so deep already,
Yeah.
or is just at a phase in development where they're grappling with identity, and
Yeah.
it's more important to then move through, with ideally, you know, adults, trusted adults
Yeah.
that can shepherd that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and so one thing that I often try to convey to the moms that I work with is that it can be, and this might not be the right time for this conversation, but I want to plant this idea at some point, maybe we'll leave this in, maybe we won't, but to label what the child is doing as wrong puts us in a certain relationship with it. That
Yeah.
kind of locks us into the impulse to fix. And I hear what you're saying that that's not always wrong, and sometimes we need to fix things. And we were talking about positioning last time too, right? And I think that can put us at odds with this child's developmental process. Like they're in this now.
Yeah.
This is something that has gripped them and needs to be worked through. And if we are attached to that idea that it's wrong,
Mm.
again, to me it's that positioning. And the child picks up on that. They feel that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they don't sense that their adult is beside them.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a great place to just dive in
Okay.
with our conversation today because
Hmm.
so I did re-listen to the attachment roots video that, Dr. Gordon Neufeld video we had in the show notes from the last two episodes.
Hmm.
And one thing that stood out to me as I re-listened to it, and this is kind of maybe by ways of a little bit of review of what we covered last time,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, the first three stages of that capacity for attachment unfolding. The first one being senses and that um, drive to be together through the
Hmm.
senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, all of that. So much, we could spend months and years just talking about that stage, but the second stage that unfolds that allows for us, this was a helpful reminder for me in re-listening. The reasons why these stages continue to unfold is because they open up the ability for us to um like to stay connected while being apart. So how can I still feel that sense of closeness to you, that my nothing has come between us while being physically apart from you?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So that next stage is the sameness.
Hmm.
And one thing that stood out to me that I think we need to come back to because I'm at, for myself, such an initial understanding of this, a
Okay.
beginning understanding, is that our first sense of identity comes out of this drive to sameness.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what you're saying is if, we have a child, an adolescent, teenager, young adult, whoever it may be, who discloses to us their sense of their identity,
Mm-hmm.
and we see it as wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just want you to know, like, yes, what you're saying resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, that's going to be interpreted as rejection.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's going to be interpreted as, yeah, an antagonistic relationship. So, how can we use this insight? This light bulb went off for me when he said this. When our child has attached through sameness to someone or something, if it's depersonalized, as a transgender identity, that gives us this lighthouse beam. It's like a floodlight that their direction of attachment, that pursuit of closeness and sameness, is not directed towards us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, all of that's to say, even more so, it is then our work to, you said the word retreat, and this is one of the concepts from Neufeld that has helped me so profoundly for myself, my relationship to my own sons, this concept of retreating into relationship.
Mm.
So I'm not going to coerce. I'm not going to try to
Mm-hmm.
sculpt. I'm going to lay off of all that. And my priority becomes connecting to my child.
Okay. Okay. So right here we are at a crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
We are or a fork in the road.
Mm-hmm.
And um I think many parents take the coercive lockdown I'm gonna shut this down approach. And so I guess in my practice and in my work, I encourage the attachment approach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's obvious that that appeals to some people and does not appeal to everyone.
Yeah.
And I avoid trying to label anything as wrong,
Yeah.
if that's the approach that resonates, aligns with your values, you go with it. And I guess then my question is always, is it working? Is it working?
Yeah.
But then that's an incomplete thought. What is it working to do?
Yeah. Well, let me just chime in here. So when our first session together, I told a story about my young adolescent sister-in-law when I was
Mm-hmm.
first learning about attachment and
Mm-hmm.
peer orientation, when I read Hold On to Your Kids, and she came to stay with us. And I took the lockdown approach.
Mm-hmm.
It did not go well in that case. And what in Hold On to Your Kids, what what I read, but I just couldn't get. It was just like a brick. It was hitting, like the words were hitting a brick wall in my brain. I couldn't figure out how on earth you do this or what it means. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what Dr. Neufeld says, and I think it has landed with me deeper now. You cannot, if your child is primally driven on that cell phone to attach to peers or the online groups, wherever that pursuit of proximity is just locked in, if we cut it off, we better be damn well prepared to try to fill it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. We had Maggie Goldsmith as a guest, and she said something similar. You can't take something away without replacing it with something.
And ideally, to avoid the antagonism, the war,
Mm-hmm.
you're plotting ahead. You're
Mm-hmm.
getting ahead of it.
Mm-hmm.
You are anticipating the cutoff, and you're putting the time in ahead with your child to already have built some rapport, some rituals family dinner, going on a walk, playing tennis, whatever those tiny little inroads might be. And maybe you plan that for months. Maybe you do it for a year before the cutoff comes. And maybe you don't, maybe you take a path, I'm cutting off first and I'm going to build up from the wreckage. But just
Mm.
know that what your child is going to experience is going to feel like they're dying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
pull away their home base, which is currently not you,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to be without a home psychologically, primally, until you can land with them once again as their compass point and as their home base.
Was it Neufeld that said, kids don't run away, they run home?
That's correct. They are always going to run home.
Okay.
And
Do you
this
think
is
that
where we
needs
have to get,
unpacking, or did you already do that, do you think?
well, I mean, it gets to all of the content that we're speaking to with these roots of attachment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are there to create a sense of home.
Yeah. I do want to tell a quick story from
Please.
my
Yeah.
family, also about the cutting off and the damage it did. Um, and it was in that within that first year of my daughter and I kind of having this on the table. It was in our home for about a year before it was out in the open, if that makes sense, or at least on
Mhm.
my end, right? I had known for about a year before it was out in the open, and we were having some difficult conversations after a period of, initially, I think she felt like I was beside her. And then I started panicking. I started acting out of fear. And there was one day when she just wouldn't engage with me. And I could feel it, right? I was panicking. I was definitely gripped by those primal attachment emotions, frustrated and alarmed, and I contacted my husband. I think she could even hear me, where I called him and said, "You need to cut off her phone," because I needed her to talk to me, right? She wouldn't talk to me. I think we're good now, but as she was sort of tallying
Yeah.
my parenting mistakes,
Yep.
that was one of them.
Yep.
And what came back to haunt me was, why would I tell you anything if you're going to punish me for it?
That's right. Ooh, buddy. And that comes up in the video. I'm like, y'all, if you haven't watched that Neufeld video, watch it.
Yes.
Watch it 3 times because I missed so much the first
Yes.
time I listened before our
Yes.
last session. I listened to it again and I'm like, oh, I didn't even hear this part. That
I
is one of
completely
his,
broke her trust. Yep.
yes, using what they care about
Yes.
against them.
Yeah.
Those wounds cut deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is when we've resorted to leverage because we have
Mm-hmm.
no power,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because their attachment, they are not seeking us.
Yeah.
If they were seeking us, they would want to be good for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It would be their natural instinct to be good for us. When we
Eh,
lose that power and resort to leverage, we are shooting ourselves in our own foot
mm-hmm.
because we are cutting the wounds deeper
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we are losing their trust. And they say, if you would do this to me, if you would use the thing I care about most against me, you have hurt me more than anyone else.
Oh boy, this this is where we are as a culture. This is
100 from birth,
from
from
birth.
toddlerhood.
Yes. And
This
parents
is our
don't
home.
know any different. This is
No,
what they learned. This is
yes.
this is
Oh,
how
yes.
our society is structured right now, is to
100%.
use leverage.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. And I am tempted to do it all the time.
Hmm.
And fortunately I can catch myself sometimes, not always, but I joke, but I kind of mean it. I'm like, I need a Neufeld IV in my arm dripping constantly at all
Mhm.
times to bring me back to like,
Mhm.
no, I know better
Mhm.
because we've
Mhm.
been so conditioned. We have
Mhm.
come up in a culture that's lost its way. We've
Mhm.
come up in a peer-oriented culture.
Yes.
Our parents were likely also somewhat already peer-oriented. You know, so much of this has been lost. And so it is kind of a, you have to, like you're saying, bring a conscious effort to shifting and creating a new pattern.
Yeah. Well, and I want to encourage self-compassion
Oof. Yeah,
and forgiveness because until you know this, you didn't know any better, right?
exactly. Okay. Yep. So we kind of jumped in just stream of consciousness. So
And kind
now
of
we,
debriefing because we hadn't really
yeah,
had a chance to do that since the last episode
yep.
published. And
Debrief
so,
stream of consciousness. So now
yeah.
let's kind of
Mm-hmm.
reorient,
Mm-hmm.
uh, let
Mm-hmm.
establish some orientation. So last episode, last conversation, we started off by talking about the primal separation emotions. And so just we've already touched upon those as we jumped in stream of consciousness, but just again, as we dive into this material today, be aware that if we are here struggling with a trans-identified adolescent, teenager, young adult, there that is just inherently going to be an experience of separation for us. Each situation may be different or unique, but it is going to be a shared experience of I'm facing separation from my child in
Mm-hmm.
some at some level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just to quickly review those separation emotions, the primal separation emotions, um, alarm,
Mm-hmm.
which often we will talk about in our dominant culture as anxiety. That's often the name we put on alarm. Alarm is the primal emotion
Mm-hmm.
underneath, what is often termed as anxiety, but it can also be just the panic, the fear, all of these different ways that alarm, can be perceived and named by us. We also have the primal emotion of frustration. And the way frustration was explained to me that landed with me so clearly was that frustration is when something that is important to us is not working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And wow, is this terrain of parents with a child?
Mm-hmm.
This is the terrain of just the most profound not working,
Mm-hmm.
something that is not working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that drive, then that frustration is that um, it can come up as anger, guilt, shame. It has lots of manifestations. But one we
Mm.
spoke to last week specifically was this is not working. I need to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I know we started off the conversation this way, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to just make sure the parents out there hear this. This frustration has work to do, alarm has
Yes.
work to do. It is not about shutting these emotions down, but bringing our consciousness to them, naming them, recognizing them. And then we can come alongside them,
Mm-hmm.
not let them
Mm-hmm.
control us, but we can develop a relationship to them,
Yes.
right? So they're not
Ab-
just happening to us anymore
right.
unconsciously and driving us, moving us, but we're like, oh, I'm alarmed. Oh, something is not working. I'm frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that frustration is coming out as anger, where we're blaming others, or
Mm-hmm.
shame, where we think there's something inherently wrong with us, or guilt, where we're feeling that responsibility. Um, all of this is important. All of it has work to do. And then the third primal emotion, and that I can see, Jen, you want to jump in with the frustration. There's
I'm
so
just
much to
trying
talk
to
about with that.
confirm, wanting to
Yeah. Go
confirm.
ahead. Yeah.
for listeners,
Yeah.
because what I'm hearing, and
Yeah.
you might have even already said this, but I just want to confirm, these guilt, shame, anger can often be rooted in this primal emotion of frustration. That it's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is one of the many gifts that Dr. Neufeld has given me, is
Hmm.
that understanding
Hmm.
that anger, shame, and guilt are a higher layer where we assign like that's where our cognitive piece comes in. I'm
Ah,
assigning blame,
yes. Yes.
but the primal emotion underneath that is something important to me is not
Not
working.
working. Okay.
That's the frustration.
Hmm.
And so the third primal emotion then is pursuit.
Hmm. Which is interesting to think of as an emotion. I'd never
Yes.
heard that before.
Think 2-year-old on the playground. Mom has said 1,000 times, we're leaving, I'm
Hmm.
leaving, I'm leaving.
Hmm.
2-year-old is not coming. And then mom says, bye bye, and starts to walk away to get the child to come. So, this is what we're talking about, what goes to the quick, those wounding, culturally common
Hmm.
leverages that we use against our kids. This is the most primal attachment a 2-year-old has to the mother. And it is used against that child to trigger the pursuit. But it's also going to trigger alarm. It's also going to trigger frustration. Ultimately, it's going to backfire.
Hmm.
So that's a kind of an super common but extreme example, perhaps.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that, when you face that separation, you're going to chase.
Hmm.
You're
Hmm.
going to try to close the gap.
Hmm.
And let's go into this in much more detail in the future.
Yes.
But this is where our fixes and fixations come from,
Hmm.
which for some people is this drive to change one's body. So whether through plastic surgery or in some cases around a trans identity, this fixation on, if I just make this one thing different, I'm going to close the gap.
So, okay. So this is, you're explaining pursuit. This is
Pursuit,
what
how that
pursuit
can
looks
manifest.
like.
Pursuit can
Okay.
manifest. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So for me, last week I talked about pursuit manifesting in um, the seeking of information.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like there's a question in here I need to ask, but I'm not sure what it is. That this is going to take, some more revisiting to really get a
Oh yeah,
full
even just I was like, we're just
understanding.
going to do a quick
Yeah,
review, and then I'm like,
I
oh, I
know.
said like 15 new things, so this is good. We can just keep revisiting because new things are going to come up, new ways of trying to give an example. It's just there's
Yes.
so many layers.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think the way this conversation has started out, hopefully, is helping everybody understand that, right? That there's a lot to learn here. It's going to bring up lots of stuff, and we're going to take our time through it. So,
Yep,
as
yep,
recommended in the last couple episodes, we're just in learning mode right now. Pay attention to the emotions, see what's coming up for you and hopefully have some patience as we get through
yes,
a
and just to,
description of the model that we will then continue to return to and discuss and look at from different angles. Okay.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So last week, then we also talked about attachment as and maturation as developmental processes. So we come with the design that this can unfold, but it must unfold to reach its full potential, its full growth. Whether we're talking about the depth of our attachment and or the growth and emergence of our maturation, right? And Neufeld uses this analogy of the plant to both model the roots going deeper and deeper, ideally, as the attachment unfolds and deepens, and then that nourishing the growth of the plant and this emergent process of becoming one's own person, unfolding on the what we can see above ground, let's say, as those roots are going deep underneath.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
those, mhm,
Oh, I just was going to say the way we support that is paying attention to the conditions, right? It's
yeah,
supporting the conditions for the unfolding
right.
that we can't get in there and
Coerce,
or yeah, or
teach,
pull the petals open, right? I'm trying to think of an unfolding
yeah,
metaphor there. You know, we often talk about the chicks that need to peck their way out of the shell, or
yes,
you know, the turtles that have to make their way to the water, right?
can't do it for them.
We can't do it for them, or they're not prepared for life, right? That this is part of the maturing process
Yep.
is it
Oh,
has to unfold. Okay.
that's right. And the next stage is always there to allow for us to be separate without being apart. Like it maintains that thread. I don't know if um there's some like children's book that's like the invisible thread that
Yes.
when
Yes.
you go away physically, you are connected through this invisible thread. So thinking of this unfolding of attachment as that unfolding of that invisible thread, that if we
Mm,
only get to that first stage, we can't, where there's no thread, right? If we're just attaching at the senses as that first stage, our fingers have to stay touching. The thread can't unwind. And we get to that next stage of sameness that we talked about last week, where that opens up the ability to maintain that sense of closeness, that togetherness, while being physically apart. So if
hmm.
I wear the same clothes as you, if I talk the same as you, if I, know that you and I have something in common, we're both wearing the same locket, if I have to
Hmm.
go to
Hmm.
school or daycare, but I have a picture of you, or I have a something of yours touching me, I take you with me in some sense. We have something in common. Um, but it's interesting what you were saying in terms of the chick can't peck its way out. What I want to say here is that in re-listening to this and thinking about this unfolding, there is always separation. With each stage to deepen, it's almost
Hmm.
as if it's both facilitated by having to feel that and
Hmm.
experience it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
also um, allow for it. It's so you're so right. It's like we have to allow for the distress. We have to allow for the
Hmm.
discomfort. We have to allow for that becoming, the emergence of our child, knowing that the road is bumpy,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, just to review, we have that first root of senses, sight, sound, taste, touch that we talked about last week, unfolding into the sameness, and then that layer unfolding into the belonging and loyalty. And each of those stages, as they unfold, allows for the ability to hold on. That's what it is. That's how he frames it, to hold on when apart. And interestingly enough, when we talk about even that transition from sameness to the belonging and loyalty, this is critical for the emergence of the individual, right? Because we are not going to be the same as our parents. We're not going to be the same as those primary attachments. We are going to be unique.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in order for us to experience that difference, that sense of I'm a part of the group, I'm a part of the
Yes.
family, I'm a part
Yes.
of the church, or I'm a part of the school, whatever those containers of belonging are, they allow us to be different while still holding on,
Uh-huh.
while still being connected. I'm not going to be rejected, you
Uh-huh.
know. I
Uh-huh.
still belong. I still am on your side, you're still on my side, even though I'm different from you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Now, as we get to significance, this
Which is
fourth
the fourth phase.
stage,
Okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
the fourth stage. Um, we talked last week about how do I give my child that I am on the sense that I am on their side, even
Mhm.
when I don't agree with social transition or I don't agree with medicalization or I'm looking out for their best interest,
Mhm.
but I also want them to feel that I am loyal to them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, another light bulb went off for me as I was re-listening to the video in that context, that this layer of significance, mattering, being valued, being counted,
Mhm.
if this is felt securely by our child from us, then it will allow for us to disagree
Mm.
while them still feeling like that we are holding on to them, that they can hold on to us.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, it's like this next stage is what allows for those moments of quote unquote disloyalty to be buffered and to be bridged so that they don't come between.
And so when you say disloyalty in this context, is it the child feeling disloyalty
That we're
because the
not on
parent
their side.
okay. Okay.
So this is where I wanted to speak to that article, that Pitt article that I put in the
Mm.
show notes last time.
Which was called The Seeds I've Sown. Hmm.
Yeah, there was a few aspects of that that stood out to me.
Hmm.
The one of the biggest ones that jumped out to me is all of the investment that mom made in her relationship to her daughter
Hmm.
that had nothing to do with gender,
Hmm. Hmm.
that had everything to do with spending time together, watching movies together, having rituals, routines together,
Hmm.
so that when the gender conversation came up and the mom said, I don't agree with you, I
Hmm.
see it differently, I don't
Hmm.
believe in gender identity. And the daughter said, you're not on my side. She literally wrote that in the article. She felt
Hmm.
like I was not on her side because of all of like that hammock that was underneath of attachment. The
Hmm.
daughter couldn't actually totally feel that way. She
Right.
accused her of it. She might have felt it, but it didn't stick.
Yeah. 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 And that became my MO as well. And there were painful moments like the my daughter feeling like I was punishing her for sharing information with me. And I think, again, because of Hold On to Your Kids and having some really concrete ways to foster that attachment, I wanted that story she had about me that she was being fed, right? This is something that families are dealing with is culturally that story is being supported,
Yeah, everywhere.
and I wanted to make that story as unbelievable to her as possible.
That's right.
And I can't, my heart just goes out to these kids and
Hmm.
how painful and confusing
Yes.
that must be for them, to
Yep.
be torn between that cultural
Yes.
story and your parents.
Yep.
But it can be difficult to not get baited with that, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
The things that are coming out of their mouth, and to again remain conscious and to not get swept away in these primal attachment emotions that can um, create this sort of snowball of emotion
Yes.
between the two
Yes.
of you to where you're
Yeah.
playing into that story, and
Right.
this again, I think is why we've got to be mindful about when we're acting in coercive ways
Yeah.
because it plays into
We're
that
scared.
story.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Because
It's
yes,
so
which we
scary.
do out of fear. Yes, we're
Or things
trying
aren't
to fix it.
working and it's so
Yes.
frustrating.
Yes, and scary.
Yep.
It's scary,
It's
and
terrifying.
so truly parents are trying to fix it because it's terrifying. Yes. That separation is real, right? That
It's so
separation
real.
that they're facing is real and
It is
terrifying.
real.
Hmm. So you're saying significance is the fourth phase.
So again, it's like that chick pecking out of the egg.
Hmm.
This is the gateway to the more vulnerable and deeper modes of attaching that will bring us ultimately satiation and freedom
Mm,
as adults. I mean, both as children too, but but over the lifespan. And so, but it's hard and
yeah.
it is incredibly vulnerable. But it's almost as if we need to have that softness and that vulnerability to open our hearts enough to then go on to the next stages, which are about love, which are about attaching at the heart. And so, as I referred to last week with those first three stages, you can be somewhat defended, have a lot of defenses up, and still pursue to be together at the senses, to be the same as, and to be loyal. Once we get to significance and mattering, you need the person you're pursuing attachment with to value you. You need to be significant to them. You need to feel like you matter. And now the other person can either give that generous invitation, show you that they care, help you feel like you matter, that you're significant, or not.
Yeah. I think we need to tiptoe into where the parent is.
Yeah.
When I hear you say vulnerability,
Yeah.
you're talking about the parent. Is that correct? Or both?
Both, but I was more talking about the child.
Interesting. Okay. In order for the parent to create the conditions for this phase to unfold, I would imagine there needs to be vulnerability there too. That to communicate to somebody that they matter takes vulnerability.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And it can be the area of great frustration for the parent. So, um, I just want to speak to a couple of these ways that this can manifest.
Okay, please.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and this is again, I have to remind myself that we can come back to this because I'm going to just do a superficial, and we're going to have to come back again and again to do it more justice. But so what Neufeld says is that like by about 4 years of age, a child can be totally clued into what the parents value.
Mm,
And even not even necessarily consciously, but
right.
you pick up on it.
They're picking up everything. They are
Yeah,
absorbing the way we are in the world
yeah, yeah,
as part of this attachment process, right? It's
yes,
that sameness thing. They're absorbing it.
yep, yep. And
It
so
doesn't, you don't have to say anything even.
no,
It's not about the words coming out of your mouth. I mean, those matter,
yes,
but they are picking up your way of being.
yes. So there's this temptation for a child who's clued into this to try to perform, to meet because they want to be held dear. They see what you value, you hold dear. They want to be dear to you.
Mm, hmm.
And so the temptation for the child, again, probably not at all consciously, is to perform it.
Hmm.
And he calls this influencing the verdict. So if I what even if it means that I'm not actually being authentic, if I meet this expectation or this value, I will be held dear.
Hmm.
So what he talks about in if that is something that, would be happening for your child, to that in this area, one of the most critical pieces is this concept, this kind of Judeo-Christian traditional concept of grace.
Mm-hmm.
That it is when a child falls short of your values that is the most important moment
Mm.
to bridge
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
to offer that grace, that even when you fall short, I still love you. We're still
Mm-hmm.
together. I'm still, you know, I still hold you dear.
This is unconditional love, is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And showing that grace of when those mistakes are made, when that child goes against your values,
Mm-hmm.
that you will still hold them dear.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about wounding, this tends to be, I think, what most of us are walking
Huge,
around with, right? Because,
huge area for wounding.
yes, because when we are small and our attachment stages are unfolding, if we get the message that we are not loved when we are
Yep.
falling short, then that becomes part of our story of ourselves and whether we're worthy.
Yep.
Mhm.
Exactly. And he talks about that for parents to provide this to their child or to their children, that we are offering the opportunity for that for them to rest, to be freed from that. And
Mhm.
he actually
Mhm.
talks about a child becoming in that we become enslaved to this drive for external validation
Mhm. Mhm.
for our whole
Mhm.
lives. If that kind of nested in that hierarchical attachment with the parent, we didn't even get to talk about the hierarchical nature yet. We'll do that at some point. But if we fulfill that, our child can be set free from it. Without that fulfillment, it could be something that they are seeking out and never finding their whole lives.
Mm.
And ways that
It's
can
that satiation, I would imagine, right?
yeah,
Now
yeah,
that
I matter, I am held dear,
Mhm.
I'm significant,
Mhm.
just the way I am.
Mhm.
That form of grace. And I he tells this story in the context of the prodigal son, that parable.
Mhm.
That the son the younger son, the older son stays, is loyal to the father, fulfills all of the work of the estate, is good. And the younger son is like, I'm gonna go spend my inheritance, I'm gonna do all the worst activities imaginable and end up dirty and like a pig pen, poor and destitute, and I'm gonna go back and beg just to be my father's servant.
Mm.
Will you just let me be your servant, because I don't deserve to be your son anymore. I've gone against everything you ever believed in, that you ever wanted from me. And
Mm.
the father welcomes his son back
Mhm.
with a feast. And that, being that just abundance of grace. You have done everything you could have ever done against me, and I will celebrate your return. And the reason I'm crying is because, I alluded to this last time, but I experienced that with my parents.
Mm. Mm.
And so anybody out there listening who's like going through this estrangement with your child, I just want you to know that the greatest gift you could ever give to them is this grace of welcoming their return.
Yeah. What if that feels undoable? What's going on?
I don't know, because I haven't lived that as a parent with an adult child, but I do know that in my own ability to give my son's grace, well, number one, I have to stop taking it personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is a place of stuckness emotionally
Mm-hmm.
where I begin to feel like I'm the victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking, is it a form of being defended?
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Back to vulnerability again. That's
For
where we
sure.
are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because we've felt rejected. And we have been. Like, let's be
Mm-hmm.
clear. There is a nature, especially if the attachment, well, in general, he talks about one of the layers of attachment being this concept of polarization. And so if our children have attached to peers and they are at a more superficial level of attachment to us, what he calls the magnet is going to be pretty short. So as soon as the attachment energies are going in the opposite direction, we are going to be pushed away.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it
Mm-hmm.
like, where's the magnet connected? And then the other side, the opposite end is like rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So if we've been on the receiving end of that, you better believe it's going to be hard to
Oh
show
yeah.
grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But all I have to say is I've lived it.
Yeah. Me too, from the other, I mean, the rejection as a parent is
Mhm.
what I have lived, and feeling and experiencing the push away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have lived the pushing away
Mm-hmm.
and the return and the
Mm-hmm.
grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Having this information, I found very helpful to be able to see what was happening and to know that if I wanted that attachment to be healthy and strong, that my role was to mind these attachment mechanisms.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was very,
Oof.
very hard. And that is absolutely what moms, I think, are experiencing, is that it feels very personal,
Yeah.
that it is a very personal rejection
Yeah.
of the parent.
Yeah. And that's where these understanding of these, both the primal attachment drives, but also the primal attachment emotions, the separation emotions, it helps us to see deeper and say this is actually not there's words being put on this, whether they're attacking me, you
Hmm.
know, all
Hmm.
of the verbal assault, all of the meltdown, all of the accusations. Okay, something's not working for my child. It's actually not about me.
Right. That became my mantra, is to think this isn't about me.
This is what the word, this is the label being put on it. This is
Hmm.
the what's being made sense of, but underneath something fundamentally is not working for my child. And that's why they're attacking me.
Okay. I do want to mention
Yeah.
the individuation process and
Mhm.
put a pin in that. We
Mhm.
want to get through the model, but I'd like us to come back and discuss what healthy individuation looks like.
Yeah.
Because another mantra I had during this period is she's a teenager doing what teenagers do. And
Mhm.
that helped me, right?
Mhm.
To
Mhm.
to not allow her to push me away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I just want to mention for this stage, there are ways that this, like any stage, can become depersonalized. But I think the ways that the significance and mattering becomes depersonalized are just so they're just so, I want to say, crisp. They're just so easy to
Mm,
pinpoint. And maybe it's because I have this in what I've observed with my own son.
hmm.
Reward winning, the drive to win, the drive for reward. All of we talk about video games and those reward centers in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is a part of this mode of attaching, but in a depersonalized form. Whatever chemicals those video games are pinging,
Mm-hmm.
reward, 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 next stage points, ping, 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 are the significance mattering area of attachment.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
And
Yes.
another thing that struck me about this is that another way this becomes depersonalized is trying to be like those who are liked.
Uh-huh.
And when I think about social media and the
Uh-huh.
like button, this is just mattering, 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 significance, 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 significance. That like button is just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
driven by this area of attachment.
Okay. Now we need to also put a pin in addiction
Yeah,
and come back to that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I hate to be short with the last two, but I also feel like maybe it's okay.
Mhm.
For now at least. And
Mhm.
the, this warmth and generosity of grace and the showing of the mattering, the being held dear, the significance is that almost rite of passage or gateway, the door of a vulnerability
Mhm.
being opened up and feeling like I am now able to attach at the heart. And so the fifth stage is um, what might be what we would call love or emotional, attaching through the emotions.
Before we get too deep, I'm wondering if we can,
Yeah,
I just want to, I think
yeah,
you
yeah.
said it, but I want to uh, say the term again, right? I want to kind of drive it home. The generous invitation, is that what he
Oh,
calls
yes.
this? Okay.
Yes. The generous invitation to exist in your presence.
Okay.
Flaws, rejection, all of it.
This is an unconditional invitation.
It
Yes.
is just the giant bear hug of energy. I am going to love you no matter what. There will be a
And
sparkle in my eye when I see you. I will be warm. You know, as impossible as that might sound.
and it is this invitation that keeps our hearts soft
Yeah,
and allows us to mature.
yeah.
Okay.
And assume the confidence of that alpha, which we haven't gotten into a lot yet, but that we are providing for them,
Okay.
that they can find their home in us.
Yes. Yes.
So that fifth stage is attaching at the heart. And so Neufeld describes it as, the point when the child might start to even draw hearts at a younger age, but this is that love, that heart connection that again feeds into what we've said before. I am seeking from you, the child seeking from us, having the vulnerability to be able to love us, give us their hearts, and then all that comes from that wanting to be good for us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that kind of like that natural power then that gives us not a power over, but where we don't have to use leverage
Right.
because our children want to be good for us, want to show us that because of that deeper attachment at the heart. Um, and this can be so difficult for so many reasons. But just going back to my own son, and being, highly sensitive or hypersensitive, I remember taking one of the Neufeld intensives, which is, kind of his deeper dive classes, longer term classes through the Neufeld Institute, and realizing, well, my son is 5, 6 years old. He should be at this stage of giving me his heart. I don't see hearts drawn. I don't feel the warmth. I don't feel this landing with him. And so, all the alarm oh, what's not working that came with that for me. But what I realized finally was like, I can say I love you 100,000 million times, but unless it lands with him, unless he feels it, it doesn't matter. And so I had to get creative, and we haven't even started to talk about play, but I hope
Mm,
we will talk about it a lot
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that was my way in.
Yeah.
And I actually took on an alter persona.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I took on a funny name, Mama Blank, this animal, this kind of, and I would cradle him in my arms and be silly. And
Mm-hmm.
I would feed him all kinds of funny food, pretending I'd have a funny voice. And I got in. But
Mm,
it wasn't until I went in through playfulness, silliness,
mm-hmm.
not myself. I had to be this other mama
Mm, mm-hmm.
that his eyes lit up. He could look at me, he could connect to me. It had to be indirect because of his sensitivity, hypersensitivity, all the defenses that his brain has to vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go in through play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting that you bring up different personas, and recognizing that you had to get out of your normal character to create this. And that, frankly, had you not had the Neufeld information, would not have known to do this.
Never.
You know,
Yeah,
um,
I say that he saved my life in so many ways, and it's true.
yeah.
The gender piece was one part of that,
Hmm.
but there's many, many more.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of my own son who, oh my goodness, he was so in love.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that comes to mind that I'd love for us to touch on at some point in the future, this sort of nature versus nurture. Um, but and I know lots of moms experience this with their sons that he wanted to marry me. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It
Oh,
was
yes. Yes. Yes.
so loving, so, so loving.
Yes.
And has gone through his own peer attachment phase for sure.
Totally. You said your son wanting to marry you. So Neufeld speaks to that. He says Freud took this and turned it sexual. It's not sexual. What the way he
Right.
coins it is giving one's heart is because we are seeking a forever relationship.
Mm,
So the son wanting to marry the mom
mm-hmm,
is about I'm giving you my heart. This is forever.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This is forever.
That book, and for him it was competitive. It was so interesting because the what is the book? I love you to the moon. It's the to the moon and back,
Oh, I
right? To the
love
moon and
that
back.
one. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But for him, like it was so important for him to know he loved me more, right? Like, I
My
love you
son did
to
the
the
same.
moon and back. And it ended up to the ends of all the universes and
Yeah,
back because he
yeah,
always had to outdo me. You know what I mean? I
yeah.
could not love him more than he loved me.
Yeah.
And so sweet, to have that
Mhm, mhm.
with one of my kids because my daughter was not inclined that
Yeah,
way, it seemed,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, it was interesting to see the difference there and wonder
Mhm,
about it, be curious about it,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
little different rituals with my daughter growing up that still I
Right,
think indicated the love, but it wasn't as gushy as it
right,
was for him.
right.
Hmm.
Totally,
Hmm.
totally.
Okay.
Yep. So the last stage, just to, kind of finish for
Hmm.
now, getting through the 6 stage model is the psychological intimacy.
Ah,
And so one giving one's heart, being that emotional intimacy, stage 5, and then stage 6 is what he would call being known.
ah, ah, ah. when you say that, that makes me think of my daughter. I think
Okay.
that, yes, to the point that she would, and I probably should let you explain it first, but, but I'm thinking of a lot of the things in her adolescence where it was almost like she was testing me. Can
Mm,
I reveal this part of me and have you still love me, right? Can I
right.
reveal this interest and have you still love me? You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like,
mm,
can I show you kind of the darkest parts of me and what will you do
mm,
with that? Does that make
mm.
sense? And
Hmm.
does that
Yeah, it
track
also
with,
strikes me as the significance in mattering. Like I'm going to
mm,
go against your
mm-hmm,
values or your, and are you going to reject me? Are you going to?
mm-hmm,
But yes, the disclosure, it is about like full disclosure, no
mm-hmm,
secrets
mm-hmm,
being known.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then like her kind of clocking me, as if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
I talk about the attunement, which is what we were talking about earlier with the
Mm,
children just absorbing, right? Like they
yeah,
pick it up. It's not about the words we're saying. They are picking up.
yeah,
It's almost like they know what we're thinking. And I even had that a few times with my daughter where we would be engaged in conversation and it would
yeah.
strike me. I'm like, oh, we are having the same experience right now. It might
Mm,
sound like we're arguing over
mm,
something,
mhm.
but our relationship to the thing is the same.
Interesting.
It was
Interesting.
wild, yes. But then like with sharing her shows with me or sharing content with me, I would notice from my peripheral vision her watching me. Like she'd
Her
turn,
response. Yeah, yeah.
yes, to see
Mhm.
my facial expressions, to clock what my response was. Yes. Yeah. And knowing that, I'm like, wow, I have to be so conscious of how I'm showing up right now.
Yeah.
It took a lot. It was exhausting. I hear moms talking about how exhausting this is all the time, and it really
Yes.
does require so much of us.
Yeah.
And and I've wondered if that's healthy.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious, would Neufeld say that that's where we should be is in
Mm,
that sort of hyper consciousness of what's going on in the relationship all the time.
mm,
Because in some
mm,
ways, I've wondered about the wisdom in that
mm, mm, mm,
because I feel like that's been modeled too, right?
mm,
Now my kid also has that sort of high attunement, not just to me, but to the
mm.
world, which I think increases that sensitivity. Ah, so many rabbit holes to go down.
So many rabbit holes. So many rabbit holes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because these are some of the deepest stages, but we're going to give them probably the least amount of time. But just
In this
again,
conversation, we will be
yeah,
back.
in this
Yes.
conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but just, that this is, you know, maybe this is what I want, the point that I want to end on for now. In the video, he talks about the dangers of the digital, that
Mm,
digital pursuit, or seeking those to stay in touch, and
mm-hmm.
how texting, Snapchat, all of these different modes of social media and the phones give children and adults too
Mm-hmm.
the digital,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, digital intimacy. Um, when we think about those as staying in touch, that's actually at the first level. That's the senses. I'm staying at that level. And if I can never have to face being out of touch, then
Mm-hmm.
developmentally speaking, I never have to peck my way out of that shell.
Mm-hmm.
I never have to unfold these deeper levels because I'm getting that attachment drive met, that togetherness that I'm holding on at that first stage. So
Okay.
that's the danger of giving dessert before the meal. We become full on the sugar
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we don't ever get the nurturing of the meal, and the meal being these deeper levels unfolding to help us hold on despite all these other things not matching up.
Yeah.
If I can be psychologically, if I can disclose my secrets to you, you know, then there's going to be times when I feel the wounds of you acting like I don't matter, but I have the love, I have these deeper levels. I can talk to you about it. I can share the way that it made me feel. I'm able to hold on despite potential differences or disagreements or wounding or separations at those earlier levels
Mm-hmm.
because I've gone deeper. But if we never have to go deeper,
Mm-hmm.
we won't.
Because
We
it's
won't.
vulnerable. Yes. It's
Yeah. And we're
risky.
never actually pushed to. We're never required. Like nature has not, it's kind of been stuck at that first place, right? Or
Y-
those earlier places. So,
I don't think we can end there. I'm sorry.
okay.
Because, you know, you're talking to the generation of moms that didn't see this coming, right? We were the moms who didn't know this.
Yeah,
And so there is that level of intimacy. And as you have already stated with the devices,
yeah,
right, that is now a primal attachment,
yes,
right? That you can't just take away.
right.
And so I don't want to leave parents in alarm at the end of the
Got it. Okay,
conversation.
that's
Does that
very
make sense?
insightful. Yeah, that's very insightful.
Um,
Yes, it's never too late, but carving out,
but you can't just take the phone away.
right. So how do you get in? How do you come alongside? And one of the maybe just this one, you know, this idea of collecting your child.
Mhm. Yes, let's do that. Let's introduce
Yeah,
another um, way to
yeah,
foster the attachment. Okay.
yes. So these, maybe it's just beginning with the
Hmm.
tiniest inroads, but things that do matter. They do add up. They do make a difference.
Hmm.
So the idea of collecting is just this basic um, practice culturally of the greeting,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I say hello, I get the eyes,
Hmm.
a nod and a smile is how Neufeld always.
The smile can get hard in
Oh,
adolescence.
even the eyes.
Yes.
So what he said with an adolescent is that you see where their eyes are directed, and
Mm.
then you come along their side and look at that thing next to them.
Shared focus. Mhm. Okay.
And then you comment on it. Oh, well,
Mhm.
isn't that interesting? Or what do you think about that? Or I just was, you know, what's so and so up to, if it's the social media, whatever it may be. But you direct your eyes towards where their eyes are focused to try to start to get in. And
Well, and when you say comment on it, I'm thinking be mindful of the comments too, because trying
oh,
to break their eyes from the thing is also,
mhm,
if they sense you again trying to belittle or condemn or
yeah, don't do
the
that.
thing,
Don't do that.
or even question,
Neutrality.
right? Like
Yeah.
trying to guide them
Mhm.
to where what you want them to think about the thing, they're gonna know what you're doing. Yes.
Yep. So mantra, collect, collecting before directing.
Mm,
If you have not collected them and you're trying to direct them, they will reject you.
mhm, mhm,
Plain and
mhm.
simple. They're not going to hear it. They're
And
not
this is
going
with
to,
anything.
they'll do the opposite.
Yes.
That's instinctual. I have to say it because I have seen that for some parents is a huge step. It
Yes.
is extremely difficult. I've seen it in my extended family with a
Yes.
adolescent father, like a daughter father relationship where the dad would walk into the room and say, Sheila, you haven't done your laundry, you haven't done your boom, da 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 da.
Hmm.
No collecting,
Right.
zero collecting. And then I saw the reaction,
Hmm. Hmm.
the hurt.
Hmm.
You don't understand me. Why are you
Hmm.
treating me this way? So the saying of hello, the establishing some sensor, you use the stages in your
Yes.
collection.
That's what
The
I'm hearing is that
senses
dad
through the
is not
eyes.
communicating that that child matters, has
Yep.
significance, you
Yep. The
know.
senses come through the eyes.
Hmm.
If you have my son will not do the eyes. So I use sound. I
Mm.
had a while where I had a kind of a rhythmical pattern of sound that I would do when I wanted him to look at me.
Hmm.
And I forget, I will go months without doing it, and then I get frustrated again that I can't get his eyes, and I come back to it. And now he has a
Yeah.
song he's into playing on the piano, and now I'm singing that to him because I can't get his attention. And it's not because he's not attached to me, it's because of the hypersensitivity. He's harder to collect.
Hmm.
And so I have to try different ways.
And teenagers are hard to collect, especially if they are peer oriented, right? Especially if they
Ooh.
have regressed, into one of these other stages. And so keeping that in mind. And again, just to kind of summarize what it means to collect and why we do it. Um, it sounds like we're tapping into those attachment bonds
Correct.
so that they can even hear us
Pay
and
attention.
again want to be good for us.
Yeah.
And so we are
Yeah.
using
And
those attachment uh when they're not the phases, what are they? They're attachment
instincts.
instincts. Okay, we're tapping into those attachment instincts to
Yes.
collect first, which is really connect, right? Like connect
Connecting. Yeah.
before you correct. I've actually even heard a
Oh
parent
yeah,
coach
connect
say that,
before you
connect
correct. Yeah,
before you
yeah, yeah.
correct.
That's yep,
Yes.
same
And
idea.
it's the
Totally.
same
Yeah.
idea. And
Yep.
that is, and smile is going to go a long way for you to get cooperation.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of
Exactly.
what I, as an educator, would say, like communicate in a way that encourages cooperation. And that means
Yes.
connecting first so that they want
Yes.
to do what you want them to do, or at least are amenable to it. Otherwise, yeah, you're triggering the other instinct of counterwill, which
Yep.
is resistance to perceived control.
Yep.
Yes. And it's an
Yep.
instinct.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
okay. Please.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So,
be mindful of your own digital intimacy addiction.
modeling,
Well,
modeling.
not only modeling for sure, but what does it do to your ability
Mm,
to be playful,
hmm. Hmm.
to be present,
Hmm.
to
Attached.
not be stuck in those primal drop? Like if I'm alarm and I'm going to the doom scrolling or I'm in pursuit of information, like my energy is going to be just crinkled and brittle
Yep.
and suck like internet toxicity. I'm
Hmm.
going to be a shell of who I can be to my
Hmm.
child for my child. I like this is a constant struggle for me, but it when I curb my digital addictions and
Hmm.
am not trying to fulfill all those intimacy needs online for
Hmm.
myself, I do so much better as a parent.
So, as we're wrapping up today, maybe that is the invitation that we give to listeners is not thinking you have to do something about your child's digital intimacy, but paying attention to your own and just
Yep.
noticing
Yeah.
what it takes to put the phone down,
Mhm.
what emotions you're experiencing even when you're on it, like just noticing your physiology and what it's doing to you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else?
what do you feel if you start to cut back on
Mm-hmm.
your digital time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what does it open up for you
Mm-hmm.
vis-a-vis just your daily life and your ability to interact with your child?
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for listening. We hope you take something of value from our conversation today. Please check out the show notes for additional resources, including a prompt for reflection. We welcome your feedback in the comments and hope you join us for the next episode of Attachment Matters.